I had a very radical father. I'll start by saying I'm an only child and a very non-sexist home environment. So my father had to take care of me for most of the time because he was an architect, and also he was a professional artist, painting and music. So he took care of me while my mom was working. And because he was radical, I can always, my recollection of him is us going to Cape Town and then getting in the whites only part of the train. His office was in Cape Town. And then the police chasing us down the station. So that is like my first consciousness. But then at the time, obviously being so young, it was just fun. When I started going to school, on the 16th of April, they would hoist the flag. So I started primary school in 1975, and my father was really angry, and he said, "You'll never sing to STEM ever again." So, and I didn't question why, because I had great admiration for my father. Then, of course, it was 1976, and even I went to Fairview Primary in Grassy Park. Then it was called the Clip, and even though I was that young, I can remember the Caspers, I don't know what it was called at the time, driving down the streets and young children throwing stones. I also threw. In 81, it was the Roundtrees boycott. I was still in primary school, but we had a very conscious teacher, and he kept telling us about it. When I got to high school, I went to Vitabuma High. Gladys Thomas was my English teacher. So she had a great influence on me, but also because I spent a lot of time in the church. I thought that, there was this diction that said, you must obey your government. So even though I could see things being wrong, I still wasn't too radical. By the time I was in standard 14, it was in 1984, things started to heat up in the country, and there was just no way that you could ignore the protests. By 1985, of course, the protests were spread across the country. So my consciousness increased, but still I wasn't an activist. I think the turning point for me was, I don't know, Charlene, if you can remember, the entire school at Zikufle High was arrested. And my cousins had just started high school. And I'm like, no, but this is like really the limit. How do you get these kids who are so young, 13-year-olds, my other cousin Charlene was still 12 at the time, being detained for absolutely no reason. And that made me a lot more radical. I then became involved in school activism. At the time, I wasn't on the SRC, but then Kusas was banned. So I was just attending protests, but in my area, we used to have school protests at Zikufle High, at Grassy Park High, at Grassdale. So we would go to these various schools to support the protest. The narrative in the church started to change. So I was active in the youth at Dislot. It's a NG Kerk then at the time. And we had Reverend Taser, and he started to preach a more progressive narrative. And it really resonated with me. And then when the repression reached a level where I became now uncontrollably angry, one day after youth, I was packing away the chairs, and my youth leader, his name is Walter Philander, I'm sure you know him. And I said to him, but where is this ANC that everyone is talking about? Why are they allowing us to experience this kind of abuse and not doing anything? We had a circuit of youth, speaking in the youth circuit. By 87, I was now going to different churches, also in the community. Being in ICY, I got an appreciation of a communal environment. So, but also...
what is ICY?
What is ICY? It's the Interchurch Youth, which was the youth division of the Western Province Council of Churches. Then I went to university in 1987. I went to UCT, and I attended SANSCO meetings, or what it was called then. At the time, it's always changing. But still, I wasn't really vocal. I was just present, participating in in the activities. Then I met Robbie Waterwich and Robbie van die Kerk. And they kept speaking about this keiko. And they said, there's a keiko in your area. And I remember one day I was walking in Bakin, in Lotus River, and I saw the pamphlet. Because of the church as well, I went to Sweden. The trip to Sweden was in 88, 89. And it was coordinated by the Lutheran Church. But as you were saying, like really that boundaries it didn't exist. So, or let's say it was coordinated by the religious sector. But when I got to Sweden, my if one can call it handler, was someone from the ANC, Mardi Gray. So I stayed with a group of church youth who were progressive, radical. They went on to, even though they were studying to be priests, they were also working for CEDA, which was an entity that funded the liberation struggle in South Africa. Working with the person from the ANC in Sweden, we would then go to various organizations, like meetings of organizations, and speak about the struggle in South Africa and create an awareness. And even there, it was valuable for me to see that relationship between religion and activism in society, because the boundary between the political work of the ANC, the role of the Swedish government at the time, it's a pity now they've become so reactionary, and yes, and liberation struggles broadly in the world, it was so closely tied. And they also, I must say, that created a consciousness around the significance of internationalism and the importance of us fighting our struggle, not just at a national level, but our oppression being recognized as part of oppression at the global level through an economic system that is underpinning it. Because also when I was in Sweden, as you were saying with the debriefing, it was a very thorough debriefing. I was given material. I was explained what, obviously they didn't want me to come back home. They had arranged for me to study in Sweden. By then I had abandoned my studies. But also by 89, the repression in the country had really gone out of control. In fact, by the time I got back, I think you and Jason were on the run, many were in detention, and there was no way I could have the comfort of studying in Sweden when conditions at home were so bad. Based on the briefing that I had received in Sweden, I could see from the way you were conducting yourself that you were directing us in a particular manner, which was linked to the ANC and the broader movement. And then, of course, it became public knowledge when you appeared in the Weekly Mail for being on the run for MK activities. So I thought, yeah, no, I kind of knew that. So, yes, and of course, as you know, even within ICY, I was a close friend of Colin's, close friend of Twin, close friend of Malvin, and so it was just something that we never ever spoke about. Probably, like we had this right to know, or you only know what is the need to know. Yes, yeah. The need to know principle. So I wouldn't question things, even though it was obvious what people were doing. But that need to know principle was a necessary one in case you get arrested. Then at least you don't know if you're being tortured. But of course, time revealed, like with Robbie and Colin's death, it was clear that they participated in MK. It was clear that Malvin had, because I was so close to Malvin, it was clear that that they reported to him. So yes, we idealized the ANC, we idealized MK. And that distinction was never apparent. Yeah. Like people always say there were 4 pillars of struggle, you know, the international struggle, the armed struggle, the mass democratic struggle, and the underground struggle. And for me, I think that we made our contribution in the MDM. Yeah. And it was a necessary one.
Yeah.